Hey guys, what is up? Welcome into another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host. Joining me are, as always, are Tyler and Alex. Alex, we'll start with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good today. I know we got that Blue Wire deal, but I haven't gone crazy and spent all the money yet. But I don't know what you guys plan to spend it on. But hopefully we spend it on cool giveaways and stuff for you guys.
Yes, we are going to be doing a lot of fun giveaways come draft night. Going to give away our first round jersey choice of jersey like we always do. Always do. We've been around for a year. We did that last year. We're going to be doing that again this year. And Tyler has a signed Phillip Rivers hat, which we will be giving away as well. So stay tuned for those details. We will be doing a live stream on YouTube, though. Tyler, how are you doing today, man?
I spent my money already on PF Chang's orange chicken, and it is delicious.
And you've been spelling it wrong this whole time, man.
Yeah, I had no idea. So I have to go stab myself, I think, after the show.
I like how you were dishonor to my family.
It's on you, cow. Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's been a great day for us. It's been a great week. Thankfully to all of you guys and your support, we've been able to be in a good enough situation where we're able to join a company like Blue Wire. And we're super excited to see how that journey will affect us. We've been kind of keeping it to ourselves for the last year and kind of holding out and seeing, where we could take it on our own. And so we're super excited to join Blue Wire and see where they can take us. So I got a fun episode today with you guys. First and foremost, we're going to have an interview with Brentley Weissman, friend of the show, is able to join us. And so if you're watching us on YouTube, this is going to be in a separate video. So when you're done watching the episode, go and check that out. If you're listening to it on the audio version, that is going to happen right now. So here's Brentley Weissman, and enjoy this listen, guys. All right. So thanks again to Brentley. I was super interested in hearing his kind of rationale behind taking Tevin Jenkins. We were able to have a good conversation, just in general, like what comes to be from a scout's point of view in switching a left tackle, right tackle, tackle to guard kind of thing. So really excited about that conversation, and thank him again for joining us. All right, let's get to this conversation that we have today planned for you guys, which is going to be about our edge rushers and our defensive tackles. We're doing this ramp up towards the draft, giving you some names to keep an eye on in a few weeks from now. And let's start with the edge rushers here. We have a really interesting conversation courtesy of Alex here, first and foremost. Alex, who is the edge rusher that you are pounding the table for in this upcoming class?
Unfortunately, it's somebody out of Penn State. And I don't like Penn State, but Jason Owa is really good. New Jersey native. Shout out to the Rutgers prep product. But I think that he's really, obviously he's tested well athletically, and that seems to be where a lot of his draft stock is coming from. And the thing that gets associated with his name, which I'm sure Stephen will bring up, is that, he had 0 sacks in 2020. And if you go back to 2019, he had 2, 2018, 5. But I think, even though he did have 0 sacks, he did get better, in my opinion, just watching the tape. He was actually PFF's highest graded run defender in the country. So, that's obviously a really great metric for him. The fact that, he can stay on the edge and not get gashed by Devontae Booker or, certain people that gave the Chargers problems in 2020. And, even though people say he has 0 sacks, he also applied most QB dropbacks on his team. Shaka Toney had 23, but Shaka Toney played 2.5 more games. Owa applied 20 QB pressure dropbacks. So I just think there is something to him. Obviously, the physical testing, his speed, that will all entice people. But I kind of view him the same way that I view Gregory Rousseau in a way. And, I know Gregory Rousseau's previous, stat lines will not be where Owa is, but I think it's kind of the same thing where he's this raw product where, you're going to have to take a couple years to develop him. But I think it's worth it. And the fact that, what you can say about him that you can't say about any other guy is that he is good against the run and that he can get in the backfield and apply pressure. The sack numbers will be, what people debate, but I think you can have a really great season without technically having a sack. And he did play 2.5 games. less than his other defenders on the team. So I definitely think there's something to it, and it's a risk to take him, but I also think it's a risk to kind of take a lot of edge prospects, as high as the second or third round, which is probably where the Chargers are going to take one. I just think if I'm betting on something, I'm kind of betting on the upside, and I think his 2020, by all indications, was pretty good as terms of the stat line, and I thought he was better than he was in 2019 from the standpoint that he wasn't just played in these situational sub packages, and he could be used in more ways. So I think he has a lot of versatility. I think he has a lot of upside, and he's kind of my pound the table guy.
I understand, like, the athleticism, the upside is definitely there. Like, the man ran as fast as a 40, as like a linebacker and a cornerback would run. So, like, the dude's an athletic freak. I just think he should be more in like the sleeper category than a first round category, which is where he's going. I've seen him ahead of Azeez Ojulari. I've seen him ahead of Kwity Paye, and I can't get there. Like, the dude's an athletic freak, like, no doubt about it. But 7 sacks in 3 years of starting at Penn State. Like, I know he didn't play a whole lot of games this year, but and I know that the pass rusher position has evolved to more than just sacks. But I mean, you talk about Gregory Rousseau. Gregory Rousseau had 15 sacks in his one season. And so, again, I understand the argument. I understand the athletic upside. I'm not taking a first round pick on a guy that has 7 sacks across 3 seasons. Like, I'm just not doing it. So while I think there is definitely upside there, I can't get behind the current evaluation of Jayson Oweh being a first round pick. That's my biggest thing. If you're talking about a second rounder, sure, I'll get it.
Because that is my evaluation on him. I have him as a second rounder.
Okay, well then that's great, because you're smart, because this current evaluation of him being
I'm not taking him at 13, Steven. Like,
no, I'm not saying it specifically for the Chargers. Like, I'm saying like in general, this guy, is being taken before Kwity Paye in some mocks, and before even Gregory Rousseau at this point, which is kind of ridiculous in my opinion. So that's my main issue with him. If you're talking about him being there at 47 and the Chargers taking him, like, I would understand that. But if you're the Packers taking him at 28, I can't get behind that. If you're the Chiefs, even at 31, Buccaneers, I guess, could afford it, because I mean, he wouldn't be a starter. But I'm not spending a first round pick on a guy with 7 sacks across 3 seasons. I'm just not.
I mean, if you're the Packers taking him at 28, he would put up more stacks than the guy you took last year in 24. So
that is true. All right, Tyler, let's get to your pound the table guy here. Who are you choosing?
Sure. I just want to break the tie real fast. Sorry, I'm Alex. I'm not a huge fan. I think I do have him either at the end of the second round or even the early third round. To me, he's all athletic bark and no production or playmaking bite, in my opinion. A guy with that kind of physicality and kind of speed, I think would at least be better at like a bull rush or something, which you don't have to, it doesn't require any, counters or anything. Just go get the guy, rush half the man. And even then I didn't think he was very good at that, consistently late to put his hands up. So I wasn't a huge fan. I think I graded him worse than Steven. So that's, I guess, how I feel about that.
Yeah, I think he's
I'll go with someone.
Sorry, I think always like my edge rusher 18 or 17. So.
Oh, Jesus. I definitely don't like him a whole lot. And I think that Rousseau, at the very least, is more, you can do a little bit more with him. But my guy, my pound the table guy, has been my edge one the whole time. And then he just destroyed his pro day, and that's Jalen Phillips.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he's as good against the run as Rousseau. I think he's easily the best pure edge rusher from Miami. He has a great swim move to work inside, but he really makes his money just having that best bend and get flat to the quarterback. In the class, in my opinion, I think the only one who can give him a run for his money is Azeez Ojulari.
Yeah,
because he turns that corner like a corner almost, not even like a hoop, and it's just kind of scary. His pass rush win rate is 20.3%. So I mean, look, I don't want the Chargers to go edge at 13, but I wouldn't mind them taking him if that's the route they went. I do have other preferences, but I do think he's the best edge player in this class.
The edge one argument for me is something that I've really flip-flopped with Phillips and Azeez Ojulari. I think there's an argument for each one of those two, and you could throw Kwity Paye in there. I don't hate that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but Phillips' hand placement, man, like, somebody compared him to the Bosa brothers coming out of college, and honestly, like, in terms of hand placement, I can see that. Obviously with Phillips, the thing is how will teams value what happened at UCLA with his concussion problem and medically retiring, and then having to sit out a year. I think he's 23 years old or 22. So Phillips does not come with like a 100% clean bill of health, but I think he's an explosive athlete and he's got crazy good hands. And you don't see many players in college with the kind of pass rush arsenal that he had. And I mean, he can do swim, he can do dip and rip, he can spin. So there's a lot of different things that Phillips can do. And if he's the pick at 13 for the Chargers, I would certainly not hate that. Alex, did you have any thoughts on Jalen Phillips?
I like him a lot. I think that I don't know. I don't know if I would take him at 12 or 13. I know there was a New York Giants mock a couple of weeks ago that had him as the pick there, which would be interesting. I hope he's picked inside the top 12 because if we get as many edges as possible into the top 12, then maybe we can get Rashawn Slater at 13. But I do think he is seriously talented, as is Azeez Ojulari. I would probably rank Azeez a little bit higher, but Jalen definitely has some nice pass rushing moves.
Yeah, that conversation really it's just a matter of like how do you consider or how do you view Jalen Phillips' medical history versus Azeez Ojulari, who's 20 years old and has no injury history. So it's an interesting conversation. All right, my guy that I have loved this guy from day one. I'm not saying pick him at 13 at all. But that is Carlos Boogie Basham from Wake Forest. I love the way that he plays football, love the way that he attacks the edge rusher position. And in my notes, the two words that I first wrote down, he's violent and he's versatile. He really wants to bully opposing rushers, and he can do it from a wide 9. He can do it from a traditional defensive end spot, and he can kick inside, which is something that he did at the Senior Bowl. There were not a lot of defensive tackles in general at the Senior Bowl, and then Marvin Wilson and Levi Onwuzurike got hurt, and so Boogie Basham was a defensive tackle for the entire week in Mobile, and he was awesome at it. I don't think that I would play him as a defensive tackle in general, but for somebody that could come in and play a 3-4 defensive end role / edge role, I think you can do so many different things with Boogie Basham that he would be able to excel in any kind of role. He's not the most bendy athlete. He's more of a violent physical rusher. And I just love the way he plays, man. He's so violent and he really plays hard. His motor is always running. And Tyler and I have talked several times about how important that attribute is for us. You'll see him run and chase down people 20 yards down the field. He did that against Clemson and Travis Etienne. So he's not the most physically gifted player. I just really love the way that he plays, and I really love the kind of versatility that he would bring to the table. So Boogie Basham in the second round is somebody that I would absolutely be thrilled with for the Chargers and for any team. I really think that he's kind of a second round type of player, and I would want him on my team, whoever I would be a fan of if I were not a Chargers fan.
Yeah, he's my favorite day 2 pass rusher if he's there. I don't know, maybe I just focused on this too much, but it seems like the swim move is just his thing. And I think nobody in this entire class executes a swim move like him. And I think that just shows me that even if you don't have a ton of pass rush moves, if you can do that one thing so freaking well, I think it was Voch Lombardi that said it. Now it's always stuck in my head. If you can be taught to do something like that really, really well, you can learn other things as well. Right. So taking him in the second round and then giving him another move and then another move. And if you start to just mold him that way, he is such a high upside pick. I really like him as well. So good call here.
Awesome. Alex, any thoughts on Boogie Basham?
I think if he's there in the second round or maybe the third, probably likelier the 47th pick, I think he'd be a great target for the Chargers. A little bit behind Jason Owe, but no, I would definitely take him at 47. I think he has all of what you want in a pass rusher, especially one who can develop a bit, play with Uchenna Nwosu on that side. I think it would be a lot of fun.
I agree. So let's talk to the players that we're selling on, and I'll start on this one if that's okay with you guys. I think my person that I'm selling here is Quincy Roche. I like the player. I just think that he's being a little overhyped, specifically by Chargers fans, because of what he did in the Senior Bowl to Alex Leatherwood. I don't know what the case is. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Alex Leatherwood, but Quincy Roche is not the kind of player that should go out and dominate a player like Alex Leatherwood. We saw even what he did against, or what he didn't do rather, against Christian Darrisaw. And everybody kind of talks about that same game for Christian Darrisaw as being like his main selling point, right? So it's a little funny to me that Quincy Roche is so high on Chargers fans' board when he got dominated by Christian Darrisaw. So it just is kind of funny to me. I think he's a fine player. I have him, really kind of in that mid-teens range. I don't know, like, if I'm looking towards him or some of the sleepers that we're going to talk about, I don't know who I would take there. Alex, I hate to spoil this, but Alex's sleeper is Ellerson Smith from Northern Iowa. I think Ellerson Smith has so much more potential because of his athletic upside and because of his length than a guy like Quincy Roche. So I worry about drafting Quincy Roche in the third round and it turning into like an Isaac Rochelle kind of player who just doesn't really do a whole lot well. He's just kind of a body who is not like he's not super twitchy. He doesn't have great bend. So I'm kind of selling on Quincy Roche lately.
Yeah, I think you can make that point with Quincy Roche. I also think that it's been a weird thing for the Miami pass rushers because it's
Right.
sort of been like, as Jalen Phillips' stock has increased, Quincy Roche and Gregory Rosso have just experienced kind of a tumble down the draft. I don't know if those two things, I don't think they're really related. But it seems that teams are just kind of, having their eye on one as opposed to the others. I actually wanted to talk about Gregory Rosso a little bit. Not a guy that I'm selling. I just thought it was interesting to talk about his placement because he seemed to be like a mid first round pick for a while. I mean, for a while, he was like someone that the Chargers should consider at their team, right? If they were going to take an edge rusher. And now he's tumbled like midway through the second round, later in some mock drafts. It's very weird to me. And I know a lot of it has to do with the pro day, which wasn't super impressive. But I just, it doesn't seem like he's a surefire first rounder anymore. And I don't quite get why that has happened because I still think that physical upside is there. Right. I just think selling, I think there's teams that use the pro day a little bit too much. And I feel like he's kind of an example of that. Like, I feel like he's going to fall exactly to the right team. Like I think we did our mock draft and he fell to the Ravens in like the end of the second round or something. And that just feels like something that's going to happen. So I'm not selling any edge personally at this point, but I have seen his stop, tumble down the draft, and it's very weird in my opinion. Just that one pro day has tanked him like 40 spots. I don't get it with Gregory Rousseau.
Yeah, the pick's going to come down to, it feels like either some team is making a genius move or they're making a really dumb move. And I think it'll just depend on who the GM is. If the Ravens take him at the end of the first round, oh my gosh, like everyone's thinks it's a genius move. If the Giants take him, that early in the first round, it's probably a dumb move. It's a very interesting player though. I'm actually surprised that he fell so much. I get the hesitation on him. Like if you just look at his tape and what he does, like he's not he's really low on my pass rush rankings, but it's hard to deny what he can eventually do, I think. And that's why the discussion was there with 13. But yeah, it's very interesting to see him in TDN's mocks in like the 50s or whatever it is now, and just available all the time into the mocks of the Chargers. So I don't think he'll get there. I can't imagine he gets to 47. But it's an interesting tumble for sure.
Yeah, the thing with Gregory Rousseau too is like, if you watch him on tape, like I was not expecting him to test like a Jason Oweh or like a Kwity Paye tested, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's just funny to me, how like people were expecting Rousseau to just have this amazing pro day. And it's like, I never really got like the vibe of like, he's going to run a fast 40. He's going to run great in the 3-cone. Like, that's not who he is. Who he is a super freakishly long athlete who has tree trunks for arms. Like, that's why you're drafting Gregory Rousseau. And sure, it's like, you don't want to draft someone just because they're tall, but when you're 6'7" and you have, I think his wingspan is like 85 inches or whatever, like you're drafting that and then you're hoping that you can teach him. And unlike Jason Oweh, he had 15 and a half sacks. The only person who had more sacks than Gregory Rousseau in 2019 was Chase freaking Young. So like, he does have a lot of room to grow and he does have a lot of things to clean up, but there's a track record for taking players like him and turning them into, really explosive players. And like, honestly, I just like watching him. I just kind of felt like if he had played in 2020, we'd probably be looking at a top 10 pick, because
Right.
I could see the growth throughout the season in terms of his developing his arsenal. And that's what's going to happen in the NFL. So if he falls to the second round, man, like, I think somebody's going to get a steal, and, we're going to look back, 2 years down the road and be like, man, what the hell was everybody thinking with Gregory Rousseau?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so
So,
I'll go to my guy next.
yep, go ahead.
I feel like with Roche, I kind of like him as much as I like him, where I think I'm taking him, which is like the third round. So I don't like him more. I don't like him less. I think that's just kind of how I feel about him.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about Hamilcar Rashid. I don't know where he's going at this point. Depends on what you consider him. Is he the 2019 guy? Is he the 2020 guy? Somewhere in the middle? I don't know. I've only watched the 2020 tape, and I know, Steven, you've graded him a little bit differently. I think as an off-ball linebacker, but I have not watched as much, nor have I graded his 2019 tape. So I can't say much about that. But as far as 2020 goes, I generally despise pass rushers without a game plan. That's
Yes.
kind of what I didn't like about Rousseau, because I like Rousseau a lot more. But what's your plan of attack? I think, Hamilcar Rashid tries to win with athleticism, and he has it in abundance for sure. But there's no counters. Even someone like Phillips, who crushed his pro day, who might be the most athletic pass rusher in this class, but even he has like a swim move, for example. So, I think some people are hyping up Rashid because he had a really good 2019. Again, I haven't watched it, heard it was great. But for me, based on what I watched in 2020, like where he's kind of projected to go on day 3 is kind of how I feel about it. I'm not really interested. But again, my mind could be changed based on how he played in 2019.
Yeah, it's a tough evaluation because Oregon State, I don't know if they changed schemes or if they just changed what he did. But he was doing a lot more off the ball stuff in 2020 than he was in 2019. And in 2019, I mean, he had 22 tackles for loss and I think 13 sacks. So, and then in 2020, it was just like the complete opposite. Granted, they only played 5 games, but it was just a weird evaluation because he moves really well and he can do great things in coverage. I think if you're drafting him at this point, I think the best kind of role is how the Chargers initially used Uchenna Nwosu as somebody who occasionally rushes the passer, occasionally drops into coverage, and you're kind of, splitting his duties essentially as kind of that Sam Otto linebacker role. But I don't know if I would take him as a pure edge rusher because I just, like you said, I don't think he has that arsenal. He doesn't have the kind of hand placement to make me think, okay, like he's going to develop here. I think at this point, he's probably like an edge / linebacker hybrid.
Yeah. I think he's probably going to be an edge pass rusher hybrid. I don't think he's going to be someone that you're going to plug in from day one. I think he's someone that you're probably going to, see where he is with Uchenna Nwosu and monitor that throughout the season. But I definitely see the upside enough there to the point where I would take him, I don't know, in the 3rd, 4th round. Nothing, too much higher than that, though.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some sleepers, some guys that we think, could go day 3, maybe end of day 2, and kind of outkick their coverage. Tyler, we'll start with you first. Who is your favorite sleeper?
I changed mine. I was going to go to bat for Patrick Jones, but I'm kind of sick of saying Patrick Jones on the show. So I'm going to go with Teron Jackson out of Coastal Carolina. I'm saying that name correctly. A little bit about him. He's a Bronco Nagurski Trophy finalist. He made the Dean's List 5 times, which is GPA of 3.5 or higher. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. I know that has nothing to do with football, but he is smart, clearly. He tested elite in the speed grade at his pro day. Over 2 seasons, he had 36 run stops, 22 sacks, a run stop grade of 90.3, and a pass rush win rate of 20.1%. Now, Steven, you'll be happy to hear that he was part of their suffocation of Zach Wilson. He was okay. He was okay as a pass rusher, but he's a really great motor, and that helped take some of the improvisation out of what Zach Wilson could do. So I think that's part of the way he was able to suffocate them, if you will. His biggest weakness is definitely his lack of a bend on the outside, and that has to get sorted out at the next level if possible. But he is great at working inside against guards, using an elite speed and a swim move to get to the quarterback, and at full speed. And I guess the guy who tested really well in the speed category, it's very hard for a quarterback to get out of the way because he's so quick against interior offensive linemen. So TDN has him as a late day 3 guy, and I wouldn't mind taking him there.
Yeah, he was another guy that kind of did some defensive tackle work down in Mobile because, again, they just didn't really have any defensive tackles. So
Yeah.
I'm a fan of his, and I did watch that game against BYU. It was a lot of fun, not going to lie. Alex, let's move to you, man. Who is your sleeper here?
Yeah, my sleeper is Ellerson Smith, also known as the guy who took over the Senior Bowl.
Yes.
Kind of himself. He is just kind of an athletic freak, and I, didn't really know much about him until I saw him at the Senior Bowl. But you watch some of his like college tape, and it's like, how is this dude, 6'7"?
Yeah.
Like, he plays very differently than I think his height would suggest, because he is a little bit quicker. He moves well too, has a nice swim move. And I just think he's going to be a really great situational pass rusher. I know Daniel Jeremiah comped him to Max Crosby, which is very unfortunate. But I think he's going to be really good in this league. His raw athletic score was actually really good. It was like the fourth in this class behind Owe and Phillips. He's just I think he is going to be, again, a bit of a situational pass rusher to start. I don't think he is, if they do draft him in the 5th round, has any chance to start. But I think he can come along over time. And when you have like that size, that speed, and, people were kind of wondering what he was, when it came to the Senior Bowl, the fact that, he can, pop James Hudson, and the fact that he can get, past some of these guys is really good. There's also a play of him in the game against North Dakota State, which was that was the sort of one game they ended up playing. That was really interesting because he played against Dylan Radunes, and he has a play in that game where he went one-on-one with Dylan Radunes and hit Trey Lance. So he's a baller, and I think he's going to be really good in the league. Obviously he comes from Northern Iowa and he didn't play in 2020, so that's why he's not going to be picked super high, but that's why I think he has a chance to have value. You just don't find many 6'7" guys with an 83-inch wingspan. And if you do find one of those guys, it's someone like Gregory Rousseau, who's going to go in the 1st or 2nd round. So I just think it's a really great way to find some value.
Absolutely agree. If you hadn't chosen Ellerson Smith, I would have. I think he's a perfect kind of developmental pass rusher for a team like the Chargers to take and have him, serve as a situational pass rusher as a rookie, and then kind of challenge Uchenna Nwosu if he's still around next year for a starting job. The fact that Northern Iowa was able to get Ellerson Smith and Spencer Brown, these two athletic freaks, and develop them into high quality players really kind of speaks to what they're doing up there. And if they had had a 2020 season, we're probably talking about Ellerson Smith and Spencer Brown more often as like a late 1st, 2nd round kind of players, because Spencer Brown, he was literally perfect. He is number 1 all time in the history of offensive tackles testing scores for the RAS model. So those two players are just really freaky. My sleeper here is going to be Patrick Johnson, not Patrick Jones. Patrick Johnson out of Tulane. He's another player. He's a little undersized. He's not 6'7", 83-inch wingspan like Ellerson Smith, but he does use his length really well. He's okay against the run, so that's something that he will have to use. Like I said, he's a little undersized, but I really like the way that he uses his pass rush arsenal. He does have a cross drop. He is able to pull off a spin move every once in a while. And so I think he does have the kind of length and athleticism where you can put him as a 3-4 outside linebacker, traditionally, a traditional kind of 3-4 outside linebacker role, kind of like a Shaq Barrett player or like a Von Miller type of role. So that kind of limits his versatility. He's not somebody that I would want to put on the inside rushing against guards very often, but I do think that he's the kind of player you could take in the 5th round, and maybe, have a kind of diamond in the rough. I would definitely have him lower than Ellerson Smith or Jordan Smith from UAB. But Patrick Johnson, I think, is somebody that the Chargers, with their kind of coaching staff, could take in the 5th, 6th round, maybe in a double dip scenario where they get a second edge rusher and develop into something more than a 6th round pick traditionally would be.
I think he's fantastic, Patrick Johnson. As a run defender, I think he's probably like one of the better guys in this draft. And he also, what separates him is pass coverage, right? And if we're talking about this Brandon Staley scheme where guys will kind of be expected to drop back sometimes, he did have 11 pass deflections this year, I think. So
Right, yeah.
that's going to be an interesting thing to watch if he would be drafted by the Chargers. Is how do they see him more as like an edge, or do they see him more as a 3-4 outside linebacker? Not that I think these titles mean a whole lot, but I do think they'll, find some uses for him that aren't just, standard pass rushing.
Absolutely. Tyler, any thoughts on Patrick Johnson?
Haven't watched him. I was looking at Pro Football Focus's evaluation of him. They say he's a poor man's Carl Lawson. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I like that, actually. I think that's a pretty accurate comparison there.
Cool.
All right, let's get to this defensive tackle class. We were kind of talking about this defensive tackle class. There's just not a whole lot of pound the table guys, honestly, but we are going to do our best here. I tweeted this out earlier, but I only have one defensive tackle on my top 50 list, and that's Levi Onwuzurike. And he's literally 50th. So it's a tough class to get behind. And, two of the players that we're going to pound the table for are run stuffing nose tackles. So that kind of just talks about how unfortunate this class is. Tyler, I'll let you start this one off, man, with our guy, Tyler Shelvin.
Yeah, it's no one. I think you said it. Was there's even though Shelvin is just some run stuffing guy, you had more fun watching him than 75% of the entire draft class. He can't rush the passer, but man, he's just so much fun to watch. There's so much heart to him. I mean, he's flying around on special teams. He's swan diving into dog piles. By God, he's trying spin moves to get to the quarterback. Like, I just love watching him. I would love to take him in the third round if he's there. I feel like he could go early. Well, I didn't know about Alim. Well, somebody you're going to mention. I didn't know about him, so I didn't think there was another guy like Shelvin. So I thought maybe the Shelvin would go a little bit earlier than we'd expect. But yeah, this is like the only pound the table guy I have. This class is really meh. Same with you. I have Levi as my interior defensive lineman 1, and that's about it. Like it's pretty rough. So if I'm going to go with someone, I'm going to pound the table for someone. It's going to be the guy that I probably had the most fun with watching so far.
Yeah, I was, like you said it, I had so much fun watching him play. The first game that I watched was their SEC championship game against Georgia, and the Georgia interior offensive line combined to weigh over 1,000 pounds. They have Ben Cleveland. They have, I always forget his name, but he plays guard for the Dolphins right now. I always forget his name. And then their center was a freshman at the time. So he was a sophomore this past year, and they couldn't move him at all. Tyler Shelvin just basically planted his butt in the ground. Nobody could move him. And, it's just, I know that defensive tackles are, everybody's kind of looking for the pass rusher at this point. That's just kind of where the position is headed. But I still think there's value for a run stuffing nose tackle like that, because at the end of the day, like, you still got to stop the run, and having a guy who can physically impose his will by setting the line of scrimmage is just so important. And so that's my guy here, is Alim McNeill. Very similar kind of player. Tyler Shelvin's a little heavier. Alim McNeill is a little more stout, if you will. But both guys primarily play the nose tackle. I think Alim McNeill is probably a little bit more of a playmaker against the run. Again, not much of a pass rusher, but he does have some good hand usage that maybe make me think that he could potentially develop that kind of trait. But the difference there too is that Shelvin will scrape down the line and, like you said, jump onto piles and make his presence feel that way. Alim McNeill is not that kind of player. So he's more of a short burst athlete, as opposed to Shelvin, who will kind of occasionally give you some more other things besides just the line of scrimmage. But Alim McNeill is another one that I had a lot of fun watching.
Yeah, I actually thought McNeill was a better pass rusher than Shelvin. I don't know about you, but for me, that seems like if you're going to take either of those guys, you'll probably take McNeill first, because I think he has a little bit of that extra wrinkle that Shelvin doesn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Alex, any thoughts on Shelvin or McNeill? And then who's your guy?
I like Shelvin or McNeill. I don't really have a pass or pound the table guy. It's just hard to find one in this draft. And like, I think it's also the position itself, because like I can see the Chargers taking one in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, but like it isn't a huge need for them to get an interior guy. And there were people commenting on our mock draft like, "Oh, you guys forgot to take a defensive tackle." It's like that's just kind of how the draft seems right now.
Yeah.
Like there's not tremendous value that's going to fall, to a certain round. And that's sort of the struggle, I think, is with all the other holes on this team, like offensive tackle, like corner, defensive tackle just isn't something that you have to address this year because you have Linval Joseph, who's still playing at a, really good level. I know he had no sacks last year, which might be a big problem with Steven. But, he's still playing at a really high level, and I don't think you need to find an immediate replacement. And obviously, they're still trying to figure out what they want to do with Jerry Tillery. Is he going to be an edge? Is he going to be, an interior guy? And you have Justin Jones, I think, who was a little bit underrated last year in terms of run support. So I think that, if you can get a guy like Tyler Shelvin, who, immediately becomes sort of the, follow-up to Linval Joseph in future years, like, I think that's a really good move if they can get him for good value in the 4th roundish. But for me, I'm not overdrafting a defensive tackle in comparison
100%.
to their other needs.
Yeah, it's just like, you watch a guy like Jay Tufele and then you watch a guy like Christian Barmore and you're like, this is the same player. And then you watch Tommy Togiai and then you're like, this is the same player. And then you watch Marlon Tuipulotu, who's a really nice guy, was a great interview for us, as the same player. Like, it's hard to find someone who really stands out. And, I know that Christian Barmore had a great playoff run for Alabama, but then you watch his first game and you're just like, where's the first rounder? Like, where's the guy that's supposed to be a first round player? You don't see him. So it's just a consistency thing with me for Barmore. And defensive tackle is just, it's such a hard position to really develop in the NFL. Like, I think if the Chargers do not draft a defensive tackle, they'll be fine because they have everybody that Alex mentioned. They could also develop Cortez Brown. Maybe Braden Fajoko becomes something. I don't know. I don't think so. But, I just would rather kind of take a shot on the guys that they have, maybe address that position next year. In general, this defensive tackle class is just not very good. Linebackers class is not very good. So, this is kind of a perimeter oriented defensive class. And so I would just kind of rather focus the defensive picks on the other positions. But let's get to some sleepers. We do have some sleepers. I'll start with mine. Is Taquan Graham from Texas. He's somebody that really kind of became on my radar at the Senior Bowl. I thought he played really well down there in one-on-one situations. I think he had a couple pressures in the actual game as well. And the thing that I like there is similar to Jerry Tillery. You can play him as an edge if need be. So he's got some really good length, good height, so where he can do some different things on the edge and as a defensive tackle. Similar to Jerry Tillery, though, he's not great against the run. He's definitely more of a pass rusher at this kind of point. But that's just kind of the thing with taking a defensive tackle late in the draft. You're either drafting somebody who think has some pass rushing potential, or you're taking a run stuffer. I just happen to choose Taquan Graham as my sleeper because I watched him recently again. So I like him. I think he's a good player in the 5th, 6th round. But again, it's so hard for this defensive tackle class. Tyler?
Sorry, I thought Alex opened his mouth there.
No, I was waiting for one of you.
No, you're good. I have not watched him yet, so I apologize for having no input whatsoever. My sleeper pick is going to be Milton Williams from Louisiana Tech. Funny thing about him, though, is that I'm actually lower on him than where some people have him as like a top 75 player. I think Pro Football Focus has him like top 75. And then TDN has him at 64th. I don't think he's there yet, but the potential is certainly there. He put on 20-something pounds this past season. He looks a little bit better with that added weight. So if you're craving a player with some untapped potential who can work inside or rush outside, and you see that on film, you can play as a 5-tech, a 4-tech, or kick inside, whatever. He absolutely crushed his pro day with every measurement being, 91st percentile or higher. I think he just benched 500 pounds in that video. So I think that's a player you'd love to have on day 3 and throw into Staley's system.
My sleeper that I like is a guy who's not even on the Draft Network. It's really weird. But he is out of Indiana. I like Jerome Johnson a lot. He actually became the first Indiana defensive tackle to earn all Big Ten honors in like 30 years. He had 18 tackles, 4 sacks, and 4.5 tackles for loss. He was just really solid. And the game that really stands out to me with him is Ohio State. And that was obviously kind of Indiana's game of the year where they made that really competitive. But he was just kind of terrorizing Justin Fields all day, low key, and really getting in on a pretty good Ohio State offensive line. I know they were missing guys that game, but I don't think they were missing a ton up front. So he's just a really solid player. I think he kind of improved every year. And obviously there were fewer games for Indiana this year, unfortunately, with COVID and everything. But it's just weird to me that like no one talks about him anywhere. And I think he is a guy that, based on his production over the years, could be like a 3rd or 4th rounder at defensive tackle. So it's just weird to me that there's just no media coverage on him. Again, that might be because he, goes to Indiana. But it's just, I think he's kind of an explosive, nose tackle, or, as explosive as they come. I think if you're talking about Linval Joseph next year and wanting to move on from him, or maybe you bring him on extend him one more year, I think this is a guy who can kind of be the long-term replacement.
Yeah, well, and to be fair for Ohio State and that kind of game, they probably were missing a couple guys up front, but they would probably replace them with other 5-star recruits. So
yeah.
So Alex, a little Eagles news for you here. The Eagles are signing linebacker Eric Wilson from the Vikings, the special teams guy, I think, and they're also bringing back Jordan Howard.
Cool. All right. Don't blow the 12th pick, please.
Yes, everybody that is listening to the show needs to pray that Alex's Eagles take a wide receiver so that does not become an option for the Chargers.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think Eric Wilson will be a good special teamer. I have a soft spot for Juwan Howard.
Jordan Howard.
Juwan Howard. I'm thinking of the
real soft spot for him. Yeah,
Juwan Howard too, though. He's a great guy. And
Juwan Howard had a great year at Michigan, so he was on the brain. Jordan Howard, I think, is really has had a really fun Eagles career, but I don't know. I mean, both of those are kind of replaceable moves. Nothing that excites me too much, but I know that, Steven is definitely hoping, we should all definitely hope that the Eagles take a wide receiver. So, Tom Telesco, the jersey that we're giving away on draft night isn't a Devonta Smith jersey.
Yes, I can't wait to give away an offensive line jersey to somebody.
Yes.
It'll be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want it, I will take it. But so speaking of offensive line, the last thing we're going to talk about here, Forrest Lamp did sign with the Buffalo Bills. It was such a wild journey for Forrest Lamp. Was so excited when the Chargers drafted him, thought that they finally got their left tackle of the future. Turns out they thought of him as a guard, and then he was hurt all the time, and then just not very good. So I wish him very well in Buffalo. Hope he's able to kind of turn it around. And honestly, like if he does become a starter and like a very solid NFL player for the Buffalo Bills, I would not be surprised at all, because I do think that there is some talent there. He only played basically one season at guard, and he showed some good flashes. It just kind of seemed like it was a little overwhelming for him. And, he was playing next to a terrible center and a serviceable left tackle, shall we say. So I think in a better situation, I would have not hated to bring him back. And I think he's going to be able to maybe carve out a nice role for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have hated to bring him back, and some people mentioned depth, but to me, nuclear option is nuclear option, right? Yeah. Like you either get rid of everyone, or you're kind of looking at like scenarios where you're just trying to patch up the offensive line a little bit, I guess. I wouldn't have minded him as backup guard or something like that. Maybe someone who it could be a replacement for or just depth for Ibushi and Filer, depending on which one plays left guard, which one plays right guard. But I think it's time for them to just get new talent, right? I mean, they've had these same guys for so many years, and I do think it is unfortunate with Forrest Lamp, because had he not had the injuries he had, I don't know what he would have turned into. Granted, again, he wasn't playing next to the best offensive line talent. I think he'll be better off in Buffalo anyway. I think that's sort of a place where he's not going to be expected to start. too many games, and he can just kind of develop his craft, continue that. I think it was a good step forward for him to not have any injuries this year. But to me, it's just a little bit too little, too late, I guess, in terms of his Chargers career.
Maybe too little, too late, but he was stock up. And whereas Dan Feeney, you had him, you played him, you saw him for many games, many years,
Yeah.
many snaps, and he just nothing changed. It was finally stock up for Forrest Lamp, and I kind of wish they had kept him around. If Balaga goes down, which he did a lot last year, and they kick Fowler to right guard, you could leave a bougie at right or at right tackle, leave a bougie at right guard, and just put Forrest Lamp at left guard, and I think you'd be just fine there. And
Yeah.
maybe that's one less pick you have to make on the interior, where there's a lot of question marks about the interior of this class, or you want to take a corner, you want to take an edge rusher in on day 2, and I have to spend it maybe on an interior guy, who knows. I kind of wish they had brought him back. If they had brought back anybody, I kind of wished it were him, based on how it's constructed right now.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And the depth of the interior offensive line, really the depth of the offensive line in general is kind of non-existent. You have Scott Questenberry, who's a fine backup center, and then you have Tyree St. Louis and Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton. So they'll have to address the interior offensive line because, frankly, they don't really have anybody. I know there's that, what's his name? His last name is Gilliam. I think is Nate. Yeah, that's right. But he was on the practice squad all last year, so he's not somebody that I would exactly be counting on to be like a primary backup. So they have to draft an interior offensive line probably in one of the first 4 picks that they have, maybe the 5th if you're kind of stretching it and somebody kind of falls to you. But they just need bodies, and they could definitely sign other people after the draft. Larry Warford is still out there. I don't know if he's interested in coming back to play football or what the situation is there. They have some options again to maybe bring in somebody after the draft, but if you're looking at in the 3rd round and you have a guy like Aaron Banks or Kendrick Green from Illinois that we were talking about on our offensive line episode, I think you probably have to make that pick just again because you need bodies. Like you need somebody that can come in and not just be a decent option. Like you want to have some kind of upside as a backup into your offensive line.
I think if there was one that I would have kept out of the trio of Feeney, Tevi, and Lamp, it probably would have been Tevi, just because I'm looking at the depth chart and it's like, okay, you got Balaga, that's good, but Balaga could get hurt, and then oops, our 2 starting tackles are Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton. So that's a bit of a concerning situation. And if I had to keep one of the 3, it probably would have been Sam Tevi, just because we have seen upside on him. He did improve last year. I think Forrest Lamp was good, and I do think him staying healthy was a good step forward. But to me, once you get Ode Ibushi and you get obviously Matt Filer, there just isn't a starting role for him here. And Sam Tevi, while I would have liked to re-sign him, he goes to a place in Indianapolis where he can have a starting role, right? Or at least can compete for one. So that's just what the upside was for him. Whereas I think he came to realize that based on the offer the Chargers made him, they probably didn't see him as a long-term, potential starting tackle. So I just think that's how it panned out. But I think at the end of the day, the Chargers kind of did the right thing, which is, put all your resources to rebuilding the whole offensive line.
Yeah. And this just kind of comes with the territory, right? Like you're getting a new offensive line coach, new coaching staff in general. Was kind of expected, but a little surprised that Forrest Lamp, did not come back. I thought that they would maybe give him a chance to re-sign. But all right, so that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. The last thing that I'm going to say here is we are going to do a live stream on Friday, so that'll be tomorrow for you while you're listening to this. We're going to do our Q&A. So if you are a member of our Patreon page, make sure and put in your questions now, and we will get to those first on our live stream, and then we'll take some questions from the live YouTube chat that day. Alex and Tyler, any other thoughts before we wrap up today?
Just thank you to you guys. This Blue Wire thing that we did, that would not be possible without all the crazy support you've given us and then the platform you guys have given us. So, this deal is as much as yours as it is ours, in terms of, we wouldn't be here without the community. So thank you guys.
Yeah, we wouldn't be here without you guys, but this is definitely our deal, and we're keeping the money. So thanks.
You guys could have the side Philip Rivers hat, but we're keeping it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow for the live stream.